Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. Today I'm going to show you how to fly a VOR or NDB approach using the Boeing 737 next generation and the flight management computer. The procedures I'm going to show you are based on the procedures being used in my airlines. I know that in other airlines it's done differently, but this is how we do it. Let's start off with a couple of checks before we actually start the approach. We want to be sure on the LAX page that we have actually set the or prepared the correct approach. So we have the VOR DME approach runway 32 in course. I'm using JPEG charts here, kindly provided to the flight sim community by Navigraph. We have a VOR frequency of 109.0, that's active in both radios. Final approach course is 317, set on both course selectors, and the minimum is 880 feet. Now, since this is not published as an LNAV and VNAV minimum, but just as a CDFA over here, we have to add 40 feet to that, because on this approach we are not allowed to descend through 880 feet. And my operator has determined that by adding 40 feet, if we start a go around at the minimum selected over here, the airplane is not going to bust the actual minimums of 880 feet. Now let's quickly review the approach and compare it against the chart to make sure that we have actually entered everything the way it's supposed to be. We will be leaving course VOR on the radial 160 outbound until 7 DME. That's this waypoint here, 160 track, 7 miles. And then we have a maximum speed of 185 knots for the inbound turn, so 185 knots is selected over here. And by 7 DME, that's the Fox Delta 32 point, Fox Delta 32, we're going to start our descent towards the runway. So our final approach fix is at 7 miles, 2,500 feet. Thereafter we have a 2.99 degree glide path versus 2.90 in the FMC. If it's within 0.1 degrees, then that's acceptable. And we're going down to the corrected minimum of 920 feet. The airport itself is located at 372 feet. Note that the FMC is taking the airport's published elevation, not the runway elevation, so 412, and it's adding 50 feet to this, since we want to cross the runway 50 feet above the threshold. So that's what the FMC is prepared to do over here. Since we are going to use LNAV and VNAV for this approach, we have to be sure that the correct QNH is set, because anything you see calculated by VNAV over here is actually going to be based on the QNH. So if you set an incorrect QNH, you are also going to fly incorrect altitudes. The only way to notice is by using the vertical situation display that is going to show you a runway symbol. And if that is not lying on the terrain that's being drawn above or below the runway symbol, then you know that you have an incorrect QNH set. And in that case, unless suitable visual reference can be established and maintained throughout the approach, then you would go for a missed approach and come back again to do it with the correct QNH that time. Alright, so we've talked about all the theory for this arrival, so let's show you how it's actually going to look like. As you can see, I've currently paused my simulator, so I'm going to take it out of the pause now, and then we will re-engage the automatics, which have currently been switched off because there is some issues in Microsoft Flight Simulator with the autopilot and the pause mode. So let's come out of the pause. We're flying. Autopilot and auto throttle are on, and let's start the approach. As said, we're going to use LNAV and VNAV all the way down. The only non-precision approach where you would not be using LNAV is a localizer approach, where you would be using VOR mode. For any other non-precision approach, you are going to use LNAV. So we're now heading out towards course VOR, that's 4 miles from us, and we can see on the chart that we have to be at 4,000 feet at the VOR. You can always be higher than this as well, unless it says specifically otherwise on the chart. But since we are at 4,000 feet already, we are just going to maintain that. Then you can see how LNAV has drawn the top of descent and the deceleration points on our routing here. Note that at least in my airline, others are probably doing it differently. Whenever you are going to fly a non-precision approach, you have to complete a so-called double briefing. And in that you are going to review which MCP modes you are going to use, which flap setting you are going to deploy at which position, just to be sure that since you don't do these kind of approaches every day, you are well prepared to actually do what you are expected to do. Also note, as you can see over here, that the LNAV track is not exactly leading us onto the extended runway center line, which you can see drawn in white. So be prepared that when you fly a non-precision approach, it might very well be an offset approach, and you would be able to see this in the airport charts. So let's start our descent towards 2,500 feet. And flaps 1. Speed checked. We'll press speed intervent here so that we are going to get manual control over the airspeed. Otherwise, as soon as you are extending flaps, VNAV is just going to lower the speed bug itself. And flaps 5. So 2 miles prior to the Foxtrot Delta point, we're going to set the altitude down to the minimum, round it up to the next 1000, so that VNAV does not level off at 2,500 feet. So that's now approaching descent. 1,000 feet, VNAV path, speed intervent. Once we are established on the final approach track, we are going to start reading out the distance versus altitude checks from the approach chart to cross-check that the FMC is actually flying us where we want to go. So, final approach fix, 2,520 feet, no flags. For the no flags call, we are just cross-checking real quick that we don't see any failure flags shown on any of our instrumentation. So at 6 DME we're looking for an altitude of 2,184 feet. Six DME, 20 feet high. 5 DME we're looking for 1,868 feet. Five DME on glide. At 4 miles we're looking at 1,552 feet. So gear down, flap 15. and let's set our missed approach altitude. We're going to do that by the moment we reach the top of the white bar here on the airspeed indicator. Let's quickly confirm it's going to be 4,000 feet for the missed approach. Set. Flaps 30. Right, at 3 miles we're looking at 1,236 feet. So 3 miles, we are about 50 feet high. Now that we've got the runway clearly in sight, we can disconnect the autopilot and auto throttle. And since this has been an offset approach, we're going to recycle our flight directors so that we don't get any faulty guidance.
100. Minimums.
Continue.
Sync rate.
40, 30, 20, 10.
So, speed brake up, thrust reverse normal, 100 knots, 80 knots, 60 knots, manual braking. We'll bring the airplane to a stop on the runway here. Alright, some of you will have noticed the sync rate warning that we received on very short final. And let me take that as an opportunity to give you some advice here. You could see that we've been approaching a runway that had some very bad guidance available on short final approach, in order not to say it did basically not have any guidance available. And we were flying uphill on the terrain. And you are going to encounter this on many non-precision approaches. So have a very good look at your vertical speed, and if you have a runway waypoint available in your FMC like we had, remember we saw the runway symbol up here, then your VNAV guidance is normally remaining valid. And you can see how we've been approximately 50 feet above the VNAV guidance on the final approach. And that is something to correct for very soon. Because if you are really getting too high at this point without any puppies or anything available to guide you in, then it's very easy to lose track of the airplane. Alright, we're going to conclude our tutorial with this. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope that you have found this useful. If you did, please leave a like and comment, and I'm looking forward to see you all on the next flight.